pick. Remember, a lot of insiders, especially among the foreign policy defense circles in Washington, really thought he was going to pick Michelle Flournoy for DOD, but he did end up picking Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin is a retired four-star general, and he's going to need that waiver, Daytona, that congressional waiver, to serve as the head of DOD, just like Jim Mattis got back in 2016 as well. So that's kind of why he wanted to pen that op-ed, because some of Democrats on his left flank were saying, we didn't support Jim Mattis when Trump nominated him to be Secretary of Defense, and we're not supporting him. We're not supporting that decision now. So you're seeing on your screen there as well, Javier Becerra, the pick for HHS. We're also getting news today that Biden is going to announce soon his pick for Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Congresswoman Marcia Fudge is her name. She represents the Cleveland area in Congress, and so she'd be the first African-American woman to lead that agency. That's a $50 billion budget there at Housing and Urban Development. As you know, Ben Carson is the current cabinet secretary that leads that agency. We're also getting reports on who will be, or possibly who will be, Biden's agriculture secretary, the Department of Agriculture. That name being floated is Tom Vilsack. And remember, he's really big into Iowa politics. He's a former Iowa governor. He's also a former ag secretary during the Obama administration as well. So a lot of these names are getting floated around. We have confirmed the Marcia Fudge news. We have not at Fox confirmed yet, I believe, the agriculture secretary news. And then people are still wondering who will be attorney general, who will Biden pick as attorney general. There you can see that he announced his health team on the screen there. And Dr. Fauci will also be a prominent member of the administration as a lead advisor on the coronavirus. Daytona?
You know what, Andrew? In that video, we were seeing mentions of the NAACP. Why is that of importance right now for Biden and his team?
Yeah, so the Biden transition met with key leaders, key African-American leaders, among them the Reverend Al Sharpton, Mark Morial, the head of the National Urban League, the head of the NAACP, and they really were urging this new administration, especially in light of all of these injustice issues that went on during the summer into the fall, the social unrest stemming from the police shootings of Black Americans, African Americans, that led to a lot of these riots this summer. They're urging the Biden administration to essentially appoint an envoy, a racial justice envoy, much like Biden is doing with climate change. He announced that John Kerry would serve as a climate change envoy for his administration. And so these leaders, these prominent Black leaders, are urging Biden to do the same with this issue of racial justice. Daytona?
So I feel like we have covered, obviously, Biden and his picks quite a bit today, and we'll continue to follow that as more developments come out. I feel like every single night we're talking about new nominations, so we'll continue to follow that. But let's move forward to Pennsylvania. Some interesting news coming out of there today regarding the Supreme Court and still election 2020 news. Andrew.
Yeah, so this was this was the first case we saw amongst Trump, his campaign's legal team, his allies and supporters. It was the first suit that reached the Supreme Court, the level of the Supreme Court. It didn't go any further than that because Justice Alito denied this motion for injunctive relief brought by Representative Mike Kelly there in Pennsylvania, one of the president's strongest supporters in Congress, who essentially, this suit was seeking injunctive relief to invalidate those ballots in Pennsylvania that were cast via absentee and via the U.S. postal system. So Justice Alito denying that motion for injunctive relief. None of the other justices offered a public dissent. It was just Justice Alito. So that was kind of the end there for that case. We're also following this case that was just filed today by the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And then after that, other states' attorneys general filed onto this lawsuit seeking to invalidate as well in these battleground states, saying that their coronavirus measures in the way they conducted mail-in ballots and absentee ballots because of the coronavirus violated federal law in states like Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So about seven more states have signed on to this lawsuit with the Attorney General in Texas. And so I believe they're trying to use this is kind of a fast-track method to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to issue some type of ruling on this. We do know that the SCOTUS has issued a deadline by Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern for those states to respond to this suit being brought by the Texas Attorney General. Daytona.
Okay, so yeah, definitely that deadline is looming. Like you said, this is, I mean, those words are perfect, a fast track rather than the attempts that President Trump and his legal team have been making. So appreciate you breaking that down for us. Some movement forward today for the National Defense Authorization Act. We heard from the House Freedom Caucus today saying that President Trump is likely to veto it anyway. So what does that mean for the NDAA?
Yeah, so just to get our viewers up to speed on what this essentially is. So the National Defense Authorization Act, it needs to be passed every single year, every fiscal year rather. It provides funding for the Department of Defense. It outlines a budget for the Department of Defense. It's responsible for setting Department of Defense policy, and also, you know, for service members to essentially make sure that they get their paycheck. You know, this is all the funding for the huge, massive Department of Defense. And so what the president wanted to do was he wanted to attach a repeal of Section 230. And here on NewsNOW from Fox, we've gone into what that means. That's how, basically how social media companies are governed. They are protected by whatever you and I, Daytona, post on our social media platforms. Remember, it's kind of a liability protection. And what the president was saying, he wants to repeal that. He doesn't believe in it. And so he wanted to attach it to this defense bill, which was kind of a long shot, if you will, kind of like this wish list item, as the president only has, you know, a few weeks remaining as president. And so many from his party, especially Republican senators, were not going to go along with this, but the House Freedom Caucus, the president's main and strongest supporters in the House on the Republican side, they went along with it. 37 of them who voted against the NDAA and the NDAA. It didn't really matter. There was enough support amongst the Republican caucus elsewhere to get this to a veto-proof majority, so it was passed in the House with that veto-proof majority. So now that that's been done, it still remains to be seen on if the president will veto the legislation anyway. Remember, he has vowed to do that in tweet after tweet. He hasn't done that yet, but it did pass just a couple hours ago in the House. Daytona.
And Andrew, do you know when all of that would be going into effect? Like, what's the timeline like on that, you think?
Yeah, so remember, you know, there aren't many days left in the calendar year for Congress to be meeting. But the NDAA needs to be essentially, you know, approved sometime in January. It needs to be, you know, passed into law for the funding and the spending mechanisms to go into place. So there is some time, and it remains to be seen if the president will veto this. He has vowed to. As far as the timetable, I'm not entirely sure. But, you know, as soon as a veto is issued, the House would most likely immediately vote to override that. Daytona.
Okay, interesting stuff right there. And speaking of relief, we are hitting our, you know, headline of the night every single night, COVID-19 relief. What is the latest? Are we going to be seeing it anytime soon? We did hear several statements today from Pelosi, Mnuchin, Schumer. What are they all saying?
That's right. So Secretary of the Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, issued a statement today saying essentially, you know, this is what the White House wants. The White House is in favor of direct payments to Americans in the form of $600, a one-time payment. And so, you know, Republicans have been insisting on this $1 trillion cap on the size of the whole package. So what they're discussing right now is this targeted $600 check without an extension of the federal unemployment insurance benefit. So it would just be the $600, and it wouldn't be a weekly monetary value for those who are getting unemployment. So remember, back in the early spring and the early summer, that was a $600 unemployment benefit, as well as the $1,200 direct payment checks to every American making under $70,000 a year. And so what you're seeing now is Pelosi, Mnuchin, Schumer, and McConnell kind of go at it yet again, Daytona, because they have not agreed on what they want in this bill. There were glimmers of hope a couple days ago, a little bit last week, on if they could agree to something, but the numbers are still off. They cannot come to an agreement on the numbers themselves. Today, Nancy Pelosi accused Mitch McConnell of interfering in the bipartisan discussions, and Secretary Mnuchin even held a call with Pelosi today to discuss the White House's proposal. But right now, we're still in this gray area, in this limbo area, going into the late weeks here in the last month of 2020. So, it remains to be seen on if there will be any relief before Christmas or going into the new year. At this point, it doesn't look so good. Yeah,
just for some context, Andrew, let's pull up this tweet from Nancy Pelosi earlier today. While it's progress that Leader McConnell has signed off on a $916 billion offer based on the bipartisan framework, the president's proposal, which cuts unemployment insurance by $140 billion compared to the framework, is unacceptable. Every single one of these officials is obviously going for certain things from this COVID-19 bill, and that's what's been restricting them from coming together and making this decision and coming across party lines. And specifically, that number will be really interesting to see how it influxes for those stimulus checks that everyone is receiving, because every American would be affected by that for the most part, many Americans.
Exactly, and one of the major sticking points is this extra money that Democrats want to go to state and local governments. Remember, the tax revenue in states and local municipalities have really dried up because of lockdowns, because of stay-at-home orders and the like, and so McConnell really hasn't budged on that. McConnell does want, like we talked about last night, those liability protections for businesses, where you can't sue someone essentially if you get COVID at their place of business or work. So that still needs to be worked out. But now, today, we were especially hearing about how the White House is in favor of this one-time $600 direct payment. Remember, back in the spring, like I said, it was $1,200 to each and every American making less than $70,000 or $75,000. I don't know the exact number. And so that would be significantly less. But there also has been talk about, in addition to that, remember, those who filed for unemployment at the federal level, they gave states a supplemental dollar amount in the form of $600 weekly. So they're trying to either bring that down to $300 and or do the one-time $600 payment. And so they haven't really decided on what they're going to do, but it remains to be seen on what the discussions will look like going into the week, Daytona.
Yeah, and again, another tight deadline, right? When do decisions have to be made for this?
Yes, and we're not even talking about, the government funding itself, right? We're just talking about coronavirus relief. But I want to remind our viewers, government funding runs out December 11th. That's when they need to pass a budget. There's been talks on passing maybe a short-term 1-week budget to get them to next week so they can do more negotiations to pass a longer-term spending bill to fund the government through next year. And remember, if that doesn't happen, Daytona, the government essentially shuts down. They need to pass this. So that's also in the mix here as well in Congress. So a lot of things happening in Congress before the end of the year. So it's kind of crunch time for them.
And mind you, it is December 8th. So we are not far from all of that.
That's right.
All right. Well, that was our political rundown. Do you have anything else you want to add, Andrew? Things to be looking forward to this week? Obviously, we heard from Fox's Ali Rafa talking about tomorrow. Some of those appointments will be made official, like we saw in Wilmington, Delaware. President-elect Biden talking and introducing all of his picks to the public. But anything else to be keeping our eyes on?
I'll be looking for, who Biden has in mind for Attorney General. Senator Doug Jones's name has been thrown out there, so that remains to be seen. I'll be also looking out for those, Georgia Senate runoff races. Mm-hmm. They're still campaigning. The president and the vice president are going there again to Georgia. So we'll be following that here on News Now from Fox. And if anyone wants to visit our website, newsnowfox.com, you can go there to find where you can watch us and tell your friends and family about it. And we have a Twitter account, Daytona, isn't that right? Yep,
at NewsNOW Fox. We have all of our stuff on there as well. A lot of interviews are clipped on there, and definitely great content to be keeping track of. If you're new to us, we bring you live, raw, unfiltered content all throughout the day. Sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's breaking news. I'm literally looking at my screen right now, and it looks like there's a fire popping up. So we'll get information on that and bring that to you here on NewsNOW from Fox. But we just want to thank all of you for hanging out with us for this political rundown as we tackle all of today's top headlines. Definitely a lot to keep our eyes on here for politics going forward, and maybe our wallets pretty soon.
That's right. Yeah. And, for those watching, let us know in the comments or on Twitter if you find this segment informative. We've been doing it for about a week and a half now, consistently each night, and we hope you're getting something out of it. So.
Yep, love to see that. All right, well, we're going to send some of you off to a 2-minute commercial break. I'm Daytona Everett. That's Andrew Kraft, and this is News Now from Fox. 2 minutes, and we'll be right back. We're following this breaking news, a little fire breaking out, and then also we will show you those remarks from Senator Chuck Schumer earlier today. I don't think we quite got to it. And then, of course, Operation Warp Speed was big headline, so we'll show that to you here on News Now from Fox and in its entirety as well.